Whether we like it or not, and whether we're ready for it or not, the mobile revolution has changed our relationship with information. And this has happened both at an individual level and on a much greater global scale. There's a story about Albert Einstein. Supposedly, one of his colleagues asked him for his telephone number one day. And instead of simply answering, Einstein reached over for the telephone directory and looked it up. The man couldn't believe that Einstein didn't know his own phone number. He supposedly replied, "Why should I memorize something that I can so easily get from a book?" Well, now all information is something that you can easily get. Not from a heavy, cumbersome book, mind you, but from a tiny piece of electronic magic, essentially, that you carry around in your back pocket at all times to answer the mysteries of the universe as they arise. Sir Ken Robinson, Sugata Mitra, and many others have explained the origins of our current system of education, which is rooted in the Industrial Revolution.
It was modelled on the economic premises of industrialism. That is, that we needed a broad base of people to do manual blue-collar work, and roughly they could do language and arithmetic. A smaller group who would go to administrative work, that's what the grammar schools were for, and an even smaller group who would go off and run the empire for us and become the lawyers and the judges and the doctors, and they were the universities. Now, I simplify, but that's essentially how the thing came about.
Since then, technology has changed the world around us so drastically that it hardly even resembles the world that our parents grew up in. And yet, despite these vast sea changes in our culture, our system for educating children remains essentially the same. Young children all the way through to young adults are still expected to sit and passively consume information for hours. They learn from a prescribed curriculum and take standardized tests so that everyone comes out of the school system with approximately and hopefully the same knowledge. Educators now have a generation of students who have grown up in a world where information is not a scarcity. Quite the opposite. Information is always available, and lots of it. And it's not just available, it's colorful, and it's interactive, and it's fun, and it's hands-on. So it's no wonder that educators struggle with how to engage this generation. Educational journals are full of articles about motivation and gaming and engagement. How do we motivate these students? How do we capture their attention? How do we keep their attention once we have it? How do we fulfill their need to create or to tear apart or to consume or to be entertained, all within the structures of our current school systems?
From the first time we started this, the kids were just through the roof about it. I mean, they just couldn't quit talking about it. They were excited. I could see that enthusiasm. I could see that they were just wanting to spend hours and hours of time doing math calculations.
So while researchers are grappling with these questions, more and more academics and prominent thinkers are beginning to call for a revolution in education, an acknowledgement that the system that we currently have doesn't really suit our current world, and we must respond accordingly for the sake of future generations. This idea of a revolution is not new. They have been discussing this for years. But only now has technology gotten us to the point where we can see how this revolution might play out, and not just how it might happen, how it is happening. So, given what we've learned over the past few months, let me paint a picture for you of what I hope education will look like 15 years from now.
Instead of tests, grades, and homework, Sunset Sudbury, a private nonprofit school of Davie, Florida, offers students a lifetime supply of gaining knowledge through a supportive environment by encouraging self-directed learning.
Every child here is responsible for their own learning. And whereas in the traditional model, it's more that the teachers and whoever's developing the curriculum has taken responsibility for determining what the students need to learn.
On any given day, adults and students of all ages interact freely, doing whatever they want within the boundaries of safety and respect. Students and staff can be found throughout the school chatting, laughing, playing, and working.
We went over this like last year.
The beauty of Sudbury, Sunset Sudbury, is the ability for my son and all the children here to truly be themselves, express what they feel, and actually be empowered to make decisions for themselves from a very early age.
So number one, more schools will turn to self-directed, teacher-guided learning rather than traditional top-down approaches. Schools will become a place where children gather to learn, And maybe they're offered guidance when they're there, maybe they're posed challenging questions to make them think, or maybe they're just left to choose what they want to learn. If you're skeptical that children are capable of teaching themselves, here's Sugata Mitra, whose natural experiments with children in rural and impoverished areas all around the world have shown just how astonishingly capable children are of teaching themselves. And not just teaching themselves, but teaching themselves very complex ideas when left alone with just a computer, and a computer that's not even in their own language.
My colleague said, look, it's fantastic what you've shown so far, but to take a hypothesis like the last one, where you're saying practically that children can take care of their own schooling, now that's too much. So I said, well, maybe, in which case, why don't we design an experiment? This time it will be an experiment to show that there are things that children cannot teach themselves. So we put the matter to rest then. I chose a village called Kalikuppam in Pondicherry in southern India. Kuppam had been hit by the Asian tsunami in 2004 and school was destroyed. Many of the parents were dead. So the children were sort of left alone there, and I had built a hole-in-the-wall computer, two of them actually, for them to play with. Because I thought it would be good for their psychological health if they had something to play with. So they were pretty adept with these computers. So the assumption I made there in Kuppam was that groups of Tamil-speaking children in a tsunami-hit Indian village cannot teach themselves the biotechnology of DNA replication by themselves. And I thought this is going to be a cinch. I'm going to put in a pre-test, they'll get a 0. I'll put in a post-test, they'll get a 0. That's the end of the matter. You need a teacher for that sort of thing. I loaded biotechnology material into the computers in Kuppam, and I called the children. I said, I've put in some material here which is very difficult. You may not understand it, but it's very important and very interesting. The children said, what is it about? And I said, I don't quite know. And I left them with that. I called these 26 children to a classroom after 3 months, and I asked them, so did you understand anything? And they were absolutely quiet. And they said, nothing. So I said, nothing at all? They said, no, it's in English, it's big chemistry words. We didn't understand anything at all. So I said to them, how long did it take you to figure out that you can't understand anything? So they said, but we look at it every day. So I got a little puzzled there. I said, you don't understand this at all, and you look at it every day. What do you do there? So this girl then, the girl second from the left, she raised her hand and she said to me in Tamil and English, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes genetic disease, we've understood nothing else. So another big important, a huge important lesson for all of us, that the children can set bars for themselves that are far higher than the bars that we set for them. So when a child says, I haven't understood anything, well, don't take him at face value. I mean, you never know what he's understood.
Number 2, the role of the teacher will shift from teaching information to asking the right questions. Teachers will also teach children how to think about information. Children will need to learn how to be critical consumers and responsible authors of information in the global network of knowledge.
The way to frame the question is the art of the teacher. So I must say very clearly, this is not a method which eliminates the teacher. This is a method where the teacher's role is not to provide content, but to provide the questions. The internet is full of answers, but the questions are not up there. It's a great art to provide the questions.
Number 3, creativity will become more valued than facts.
I believe the changes taking place on Earth now are without precedent in terms of their character and their implications. And our best salvation is to develop this capacity for imagination and to do it systematically through public education and to connect people with their true talents. We simply can't afford this devastation anymore.
Number 4, as a result of these changes, individual educations may be extremely varied by the time children leave school. causing us to move away from traditional test-based evaluations towards more qualitative demonstrations of learning. The requirements for this vision are not very great, and many of them are already in place. What do you think? Is this a future that you would want to attain? And if so, is it within our grasp?